I'd love to get your thoughts, and especially with the foreign policy, obviously, I hear you're good at that. What you look at when you're seeing what's happening right now. Why don't we start with you?
Madeleine's more senior.
Well, I think we're living in an incredibly complicated time, and although I voted for somebody else, I do think that no matter who would have won, we were looking at a very, very complex time. And I do think that there are two mega trends that are out there that not only have a positive side but a downside to them that I think have very much of an effect on where we are. So the first one is globalization. It's now a very common word, but there are many positive aspects to it in terms of the possibility of living in a world where we could travel and know people from different countries and have businesses in different places and understand our interconnection. The downside of it is, however, that it's faceless. And people kind of don't have an identity, and so people are grouping more and more by their identity, which, whether it's linguistic or ethnic or religious, and that's fine. We all want an identity. But when my identity hates your identity, that causes tremendous problems. Patriotism is a very important concept. Nationalism is a very dangerous concept. And hyper-nationalism is very scary. So that's one megatrend. The other one is technology. And again, it's incredible, the kinds of things that we can do and how we can pick up a phone and call anybody anywhere or text or whatever. And there's always the great example about the woman farmer in Kenya who doesn't have to walk miles anymore because she can pay her bill with a mobile phone. So those are the positive parts. The downside of technology is that it has completely disaggregated voices. And people get their information from one source, which is what they think they know, and there is no kind of common information base. And that has made it very difficult for there to be political parties and groupings, and so that disaggregation. How do you, for instance, get from what happened in Cairo, Tahrir Square, to governance? Now, one of the times that I was out here, I was at a meeting in Silicon Valley, and I stole this line, and so it is definitely plagiarized, but it explains so many things. People are talking to their governments on 21st century technology. The governments listen to them on 20th century technology and give them 19th century responses. And therefore, there is no confidence in institutions. So what's going on is the institutional structure that I certainly grew up in, and you did, doesn't exist anymore, whether it's national or international, and people only have confidence in their local city councils or mayors. So that's kind of what I think is going on as we are in 2017.
I would agree with that, but I would just add the following, and it's something that we need to better understand as a country. Clearly, there are people who feel that they've been left out of the progress of the last 70 years of globalization. When I teach a course at the Graduate School of Business at Stanford, I'll have a student who was born in Brazil, went to college in Oxford, had his first job in Shanghai, is now in graduate school at Stanford, and the next job will be in Dubai. And that person moves seamlessly around the world, feeling really comfortable in all contexts. And yet most people never live more than 25 miles from where they were born. And so we have really a kind of divorce between people who are part of that global elite and people who are not. And if you look at the number of people who've lost and don't have the skills to keep up with this economy, they're feeling dispossessed, they're angry. Unfortunately, I think in this election, they were told, well, it's the fault of the Chinese, it's the fault of the Mexicans, it's the fault of the big banks from the other side. That's what populism is. And one can understand why they're looking for different solutions. I just think we're going to have to get back to looking for those solutions in really the development of human potential. And I'll say one other thing. It's not just the 45-year-old who doesn't have the job skills to keep up with the modern economy. But probably the greatest national security threat that we face is the failure of K-12 education to educate the poorest kids. And if we don't do that, we're going to have people who are unemployed because you can't get a job in this economy if you can't read. They won't be able to join even the military, where 30% of the people can't pass the basic skills test to get into the military. And we're going to be even more two countries, one capable and one not. And that is the death knell for democracy.
And that's worldwide too, because there's a lot of, some of the religious extremism comes from that, because those are answers, correct?
It is true. I think that the identity issue that Madeleine mentioned is causing people to look for something larger than themselves, and if you have ISIS telling you that that's larger than yourself and you have no other prospects, that sounds good. But I think we have a particular problem in the United States. Americans are not held together by race, ethnicity, nationality, or religion. Our ancestors have come from every corner of the earth. If the man from Mars were to come down and say, what holds these people together, you'd have to say, well, it's an aspiration.
No, I was going to say Kim Kardashian.
Hopefully not, but anything works. But it's an aspiration, and that aspiration is you can come from humble circumstances, you can do great things. Well, the only way that that's ever been true is high-quality education. But today, I can look at your zip code, I can tell whether you're going to get a high-quality education. That promise isn't true, and that's why we are particularly vulnerable as a country, because we are an idea. We're not a nationality, we're not a religion, we are an idea.
So let's talk a little bit about that concept of what's happened here. It gets you right to this idea of immigration, which I think is again at the heart of this country. It's, we've got some Statue of Liberty, we've got all the sayings, and there is ideas around that, even if we've broken a lot of them over time or betrayed that. How do you feel about the ban that's happening right now? I don't know what to call it, but I'm going to call it.
I don't know what. Look, I am a very strong proponent of immigration. I'm on record as having said so. The reason the United States has mobilized human potential so well is that we the people has had no particular ethnic or national or religious definition. You can come from any place and be part of we the people. And so I'm very believe in that. I think that the policy was, let's say I don't agree with it. I think it was ill-considered. It was even badly delivered. I do think that
You just say it sucks, but
my grandmother always said, if you can't say something nice about somebody, don't say anything. So I believe that. But let me just say, we do have reasons to control our borders. We do have reasons to vet people. We do have reasons to have a visa system that works. Those are all true. We do have a desire to make ourselves safer by making sure that the vetting is good. I was the National Security Advisor on 9/11. And the day after 9/11, we essentially cut off our borders. We stopped student visas. And it was, at the moment, it felt like we were making ourselves more secure, but it turned out to really be a mistake. And we took kind of 2 years trying to unravel that so that students could come back to the United States, because the very best foreign policy, the very best public diplomacy that we have is actually when people come here and study and see what it really is like to be in America. And I'm a university professor. I believe in the ability of people to move freely, to have scholars move freely, to have students move freely. Yes, we need to control our borders. Yes, we need to vet people, but let's not lose sight of the big picture.
Madeleine, how do you look at what's happening? A lot of it is based in fear. It seems like it's all fear-based almost. But
I'm going to be much less polite.
okay, good.
I think it is one of the worst things that has happened in an administration that is only a week old or 10 days old. It has made us less safe, and it has hurt us in so many different ways.
So explain that.
Well, I'm an immigrant and a refugee. I do not have a terribly sad story, but I came here when I was 11 years old from Czechoslovakia. And what used to be, my father was a Czechoslovak diplomat, and we spent the war in England, and then came here when the communists took over. And my father used to say, in Europe, people would say, we're so sorry, your country's been taken over by a terrible dictator. You're welcome here, what can we do to help you, and when are you going home? When we came to the United States, people said, we're so sorry, your country's been taken over by a terrible system. You're welcome here, what can we do to help you, and when will you become a citizen? And my father said, that is what makes this country different. I think that unprepared the way the whole thing was rolled out. It did not look at the unintended consequences, which are that we now are having even more problems with countries that are the designated on this. And it was based on untrue facts. And so the concept...
They're called alternate facts now. Go ahead.
Yeah, alternative facts. I mean, in terms of the countries that were chosen, there is not one example from those where a refugee from any one of those 7 countries was involved in a terrorist attack. And so, and then I think it really has created terrible problems in terms of how we are viewed, what America's about. And so I think and this country is, exactly as Condi said, is based on an idea. I do think we have to vet. There is a very, very rigorous vetting process in place that is being reviewed at various times. I think there are dangers in this world, but we have really, I think, now created a situation where there is more dislike of us, where there is more likely to it's a gift to ISIS. They are now using it as a propaganda thing, saying, why would you want to have anything to do with these horrible people? So I do think that it has caused
Well, I would, first of all, I don't think ISIS needed this. They've managed without it. But let me just say this. We do have to recognize that there is a security dimension, as Madeleine said, and we do have proper vetting. But in 2011, President Obama did put a hold on refugees from Iraq for 6 months. And I think from time to time one has to do that. Now, I think this was, as I said, ill-considered and badly delivered. But one thing that will help greatly is when there is a more regularized process, and that's what I think we have to counsel and hope for. We just got today the confirmation of the Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson. We have a very good Department of Homeland Security Secretary in John Kelly. We have a very good Secretary of Defense in Jim Mattis. It is really time that the agencies now become the center of this policy making, because Madeleine and I have also both been in the White House, and the White House can't, even under the best of circumstances, the White House cannot execute policy like the agencies can.
Well,
so there's got to be a shift.
Let's talk about it, because it feels as if he watches cable and then makes a decision. That's what it feels like. It literally, I was saying earlier, like I literally get in the shower and suddenly we're not speaking to England, like, or something like that.
No,
but talk about that policy.
Yeah, let me just say something. Let me say something.
He will give power to those people.
I don't know. I'm not inside.
And you know people.
And I know people who are inside. But we have a system that was built by the Founding Fathers to constrain the presidency. In fact, it was their overwhelming preoccupation to constrain executive authority. We have 2 houses of Congress with 535 people. We have 3 branches of government. As you notice, the courts have been active after this executive order. We have 50 states and 50 state legislatures, not to mention local officials. This is a very complex, it's a web of constraints. It is my hope that as a group of people, and remember, we are in a different world. This is a president who, by the way, is now the president, who was not ever in government in any shape, form, or fashion. That is different in our history. And so I would ask people to, speak out, be concerned, write to your congressman, call them, protest, do all of those things. But also remember that there was an election, this is our president, and we're all going to have to try to make it work.
No, I get that. I get that on a lot of levels. But that is not an excuse for wondering if all these checks and balances, what you're talking about, will work in this situation. This is unlike any other.
Well, we're, 15 days in?
It seems like 400.
It may to you, but maybe not to the people who actually elected him. So all that I'm saying is we have a system.
All right.
Let's give it a chance to work.
All right, Madeleine, help me here.
Well, I definitely believe we should give it a chance.
He's so much smarter than me. It's scary. Go ahead.
Not necessarily. No, let me say, I'm so glad I don't have to defend this administration.
Neither do I.
I think the following thing. I find fascinating, I teach also, and the first article of the Constitution is about the power of Congress. And I hope very much that Congress does exert its power, that it is not totally blocked by partisanship so that there is a crossing of aisles. I believe in bipartisanship. I proved that by working with Jesse Helms and most recently with your business partner, Steve Hadley. I do believe it. But I do think that Congress is a very powerful way of limiting. As you said, we didn't want George III. I mean, what we really wanted was to have a government where there is the balance, the checks and balances. So we have to see it work. I don't like the way already people are kind of making fun of members of Congress for getting angry or being able to give a talk. I just was listening this morning in terms of some senators who really were explaining why they didn't want Jeff Sessions as Attorney General. I think that's their right to do that, and I think we need to respect that. I am very troubled by a new thing, which you were talking about, is information these days.
Right.
I have been fascinated all my life in terms of the role of information in political change. And one of the things when I said where people get their information, people don't have the kind of common view of what is real and not. And some of the statements made about the press being the opposition, that's not the role of the press. It's the fourth estate. It tells the truth. Truth. And so I think we have to figure out where the information is coming from. I think the damage done to America by tweets already, in terms of the relationship with Mexico, which is a very, very important neighbor and partner to us, and some of the things that have gotten out. I respected the president that Condi worked for, the two of them, because I do respect elections. I don't respect, I think the bureaucracy always needs some disruption. It does not need destruction, and I'm very troubled by what I've seen.
Get to that, Condi, the idea of tweets. Is there one issue that you think is paramount, each of you, very briefly?
I vote for North Korea.
North Korea.
I think it's...
I do too.
You do too. And
Mainly because we are dealing with somebody that is not a rational actor on the other side, and there are pressures on him, and I agree with you, the Chinese, we hope they have influence, but they don't.
So what to do there? Like send in James Bond? What do we do? That's my preference.
Well, the first thing is I think you do have to try to align our interests and those of the Chinese, and that means having a serious conversation about whether we can really tolerate this nuclear North Korea with a nutcase at the helm that will threaten the United States, and saying to them in no uncertain terms, no, we can't. Now what are we going to do about it? Because if the Chinese were actually to bring all their leverage to bear on North Korea, then the North Koreans might have to make other choices.
And South Korea doesn't play a role here. They've got their own set of issues.
Well, they do have their own issues, but South Korea obviously is most vulnerable if the North were to try and retaliate in some fashion against the South. So it's a complex problem, but I just think it's the most urgent.
So let's
And it is in our story, not just in my story.
People will be really surprised.
All right, okay.
So I already mentioned my father, and my father came to the United States and defected and asked for political asylum. And at that stage, the Rockefeller Foundation was finding jobs for Central European intellectuals, and so they found him a job at the University of Denver. We had no idea where Denver was.
Okay.
My parents started driving across America, and my mother said, we must be going the wrong direction because we're not going up, even though they say it's the mile-high city. So anyway, we settled there. My father became a professor, and ultimately he became dean of the Graduate School of International Affairs. And he died in 1977, and by then he was a pretty big deal in Denver, and there were lots of flowers and tributes at his funeral, and among them was this ceramic pot in the shape of a piano with some leaves in it. So I said to my mother, where did this come from? And she said, it's from your father's favorite student, Condoleezza Rice.
Wow.
And so what happened was, Connie was a music major, hence the piano, and your family was associated with the university. So you can tell the rest of it.
So it is actually Dr. Corbell who rescued this failed piano major, because I realized I was going to end up teaching 13-year-olds to murder Beethoven, decided to find another major, and wandered into his course in international politics. So I was in my hotel room in Washington. I was visiting Washington. I get a call from Madeleine, who I had known only through her father. She was working for the campaign of Michael Dukakis.
We have to tell an in-between part,
Yeah.
which is you got your master's.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I got my master's and
Notre
at
Dame.
Notre Dame, came back, and I was wandering the halls of
You were writing your dissertation.
No, I was Madeline, let me tell my part of the story. I was wandering the halls
I'm totally envisioning a
looking
reality.
for something to do, and I ran into Dr. Corbell, who said, you should do a PhD because you would be a great professor. And I thought, I don't want to be a professor, but went to the PhD program, and he was my doctoral advisor until his death. And that's when I sent the flowers. Now you can do the
Hotel
Dukakis
room.
story if you
So
want.
what happened was, I did not know.
Dukakis Hotel Room.
Okay, so what happened, I was working for Michael Dukakis, finding foreign policy advisors for him, and I had heard about this woman, Condoleezza Rice, who was then a professor, woman, teaching, and I thought, perfect. So I call her up and I say, this is what I'm doing, and you?
I say, Madeline, there's only one problem. I'm a Republican.
And I said, Condi, how could you be? We had the same father. I wish that women helped each other more.
Well, I remember that quote.
Yes.
Do you regret saying that?
No, let me just say this. I have been
This is the
saying,
quote where you
this is,
said
well,
special place.
I have said this over and over again, that there's a special place in hell for women who don't help each other.
Right.
Have said that for the last 25 years.
Right.
And it came out of my own life, frankly, because we do something that we shouldn't to each other. Women are very judgmental of each other. So when I started, I was 22, I had my children at 24, and I got bored. I wanted to go back to graduate school. And the people that criticized me the most were other women, saying, why aren't you in the carpool line instead of in the library? Or they would really say, my hollandaise sauce is so much better than yours, or whatever. And constantly putting me down. And then when I was working for Geraldine Ferraro as her foreign policy person, we were traveling around, and a housewife in Nebraska would say, well, how can she deal with Russians? I can't deal with Russians. Well, nobody was asking her to deal with Russians. And we have this kind of way of projecting our own weaknesses onto other women. And so there either is that, or what I call the queen bee complex. If there's only one job at the top, it's going to be mine and not yours. What I had always wished was that there was another woman in the room, so that when I was in the Principals Committee meeting at the National Security Council, that I could say, I mean, I wish we'd been there at the same time, as Condi said, instead of the man saying, as Sandy said, because they do that to each other. So I do think women need to help each other. By the way, what happened when I said that in New Hampshire, and people started applauding. I was with Hillary, and they didn't hear what my next line was, which is, therefore, you are going to the other place because of everything you've done for women. So that line was taken out of context. I do not regret saying it over the 25 years. I regret that it had something to do with voting, because I would never vote for Sarah Palin.
Okay.